The Desert Rose Diner sat like a forgotten relic along Route 66, somewhere between Flagstaff and Albuquerque, where the Arizona desert met the New Mexico borderlands. Its neon sign flickered weakly against the vast darkness of the highway, a pink glow that had lost its luster decades ago. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee, grease from the fryer, and the faint trace of cigarette smoke that no amount of cleaning could ever fully erase. It was 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in late September when Simone Watts heard the rumble. She'd been wiping down the counter for the third time that hour, her dark hands moving in methodical circles across the chipped formica surface. The diner was empty except for old Mr. Kowalski in booth 7, who'd been nursing the same cup of decaf for 2 hours, his weathered face buried in yesterday's newspaper. Simone had learned not to rush him. At 63 years old, she'd learned not to rush much of anything anymore. The rumble started low, a distant thunder that made the windows vibrate in their frames. Simone paused mid-wipe, her brown eyes lifting toward the darkness beyond the glass. She knew that sound. Everyone who worked the graveyard shift on this stretch of highway knew that sound. Motorcycles, and not just one or two. "Here we go," she muttered under her breath, tossing the rag aside and straightening her stained apron. Her lower back ached. It always did by this hour, and her feet throbbed in the worn sneakers she'd been meaning to replace for 6 months. The fluorescent lights above hummed their constant electric song, casting everything in that particular shade of tired yellow that made everyone look sick. "Mr." Kowalski glanced up briefly, his pale blue eyes meeting hers with understanding. He folded his newspaper slowly, deliberately, and slid a $5 bill onto the table before shuffling toward the door. He'd been coming here long enough to know what came next. "Be careful, Simone," he said quietly as he passed, the bell above the door chiming his exit. "Always am," she replied, but her voice carried less conviction than usual. The rumble grew louder, closer, until it became a roar that seemed to shake the very foundation of the building. Through the windows, Simone watched as headlights pierced the darkness. 6, maybe 7 motorcycles, their chrome gleaming under the diner's exterior lights as they pulled into the gravel parking lot in a choreographed formation that spoke of years riding together. The engines cut simultaneously, plunging the night back into relative silence. But it wasn't really silent. It never was when they arrived. There was laughter, that particular brand of male laughter that came from too much beer and too little sleep. Boots crunched on gravel. Someone dropped a bottle that shattered, followed by more laughter. Simone's hand moved instinctively to her apron pocket, feeling the weight there. The weight she'd carried every single shift for the past 3 months ever since she'd made her decision. Her heart rate picked up, a steady drumbeat in her ears that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with purpose. The door burst open, and they filed in like they owned the place. 7 men ranging in age from mid-30s to what looked like late 60s, all wearing the same leather cuts with the same patch on the back, a grinning skull with flames erupting from empty eye sockets, and above it the words, "Iron Brotherhood MC." Their boots were scuffed, their jeans torn in places, and their faces carried the maps of hard lives lived on the road. "Well, well, well," the first one through the door announced, spreading his arms wide like a ringmaster entering the circus. He was younger than the others, maybe 37, with a shaved head and a neck tattoo of a serpent that disappeared beneath his collar. "Look what we got here, boys. The Desert Rose herself, open and waiting for us." The others laughed as they claimed the large corner booth, their movements casual but with an undercurrent of barely contained energy that made Simone's skin prickle. She'd seen this type before. Hell, she'd been seeing this type her entire life. Men who took up space like it was their birthright, who looked through service workers like they were furniture. "Coffee," one of them barked, not even looking at her. "Menus are on the table," Simone said, her voice steady despite the electricity coursing through her veins. She moved to the coffee station, her hands steady as she pulled out 7 mugs. The routine of it was almost meditative. Ceramic against laminate, the gurgle of coffee pouring, the clink of spoons. "Hey, sweetheart," the one with the neck tattoo called out. His name tag, they all wore name tags sewn onto their cuts, read Viper. "You got anything fresh? Or is everything here as old and worn out as you?" More laughter. Simone's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. She'd heard worse. She'd survived worse. She carried the coffee tray to their booth, setting mugs down one by one. Up close, she could see them more clearly. Viper with his cruel smirk. A heavy-set man they called Tiny, whose massive arms were covered in faded prison tattoos. A thin, nervous-looking guy with acne scars and hands that wouldn't stop fidgeting. Cricket, from what she could hear. And then there was the one sitting in the back corner of the booth, partially hidden by the others. He was older, maybe 65, with a thick beard that had gone almost completely gray. His face was weathered like old leather, deep lines carved around his eyes and mouth. Unlike the others, he wasn't laughing. His dark eyes that might have been brown once but now seemed almost black in the dim light, watched her with an intensity that made something cold slide down her spine. His name tag read, Prophet. "You deaf or something?" Viper snapped his fingers in her face. "I asked if you got anything fresh." Simone stepped back out of his reach. "Kitchen closes at 2. I can make you sandwiches. Pies from yesterday." "Course it is," he sneered. "Probably like everything else in this dump, stale and past its prime." The others laughed again, except Prophet. He continued watching her with those dark, unreadable eyes, and Simone felt something shift in her chest. Recognition? No, not quite, but something. "I'll take a burger," one of the other men said. His tag read Diesel. He had kind eyes, incongruous with the rest of his appearance. "If it ain't too much trouble, ma'am." "No trouble," Simone replied, appreciating the respect even as she wondered if it was genuine or just habit. She took the rest of their orders, her hand cramping around the pen as she scribbled on her pad. The whole time she could feel Prophet's eyes on her, not leering like Viper's, not dismissive like the others. Something else, something that made her think of old photographs and half-remembered dreams. Back behind the counter as she fired up the grill and dropped frozen patties onto the hot surface, Simone's hand found its way back to her apron pocket. Her fingers traced the outline of what lay hidden there, cold and heavy, and full of terrible purpose. For 27 years she'd worked at the Desert Rose. 27 years of coffee refills and grease burns and men like these who treated her like wallpaper. 27 years of going home to her small apartment, of visiting her mother's grave every Sunday, of carrying questions that had no answers. Until 3 months ago. 3 months ago, she'd found the box in her mother's closet while cleaning out the apartment after the funeral. A shoebox held shut with a rubber band that disintegrated when she touched it. Inside, photographs, letters, a newspaper clipping from 1959, yellowed and brittle, and underneath it all, wrapped in an old bandana, a .38 special revolver that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. But it was the photograph that had stopped her heart. A young woman, her mother, Lorraine, maybe 19 years old, standing in front of this very diner, her arm around a man whose face had been deliberately scratched out. On the back, in her mother's handwriting, 1959, before everything changed. The sizzle of the burgers brought her back to the present. Simone flipped them mechanically, added cheese to those who wanted it, assembled the sandwiches with the precision of someone who'd done it 10,000 times. But her mind was elsewhere, calculating, measuring, preparing. When she brought the food out, the atmosphere had shifted. The men were quieter now, their initial bravado mellowing into the comfortable silence of old friends who didn't always need to fill the air with words. They ate like hungry animals, focused and efficient. All except Prophet, who had barely touched his coffee. He was still watching her. Simone stood behind the counter, her hand in her apron pocket, fingers wrapped around cold metal. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she was sure they could hear it. The clock on the wall read 3:23 a.m. The highway outside was dark and empty. No cars had passed in over an hour. It was time. She'd rehearsed this moment in her mind 1,000 times, played out every scenario, every possible response, every outcome. But now that the moment had arrived, her hands were shaking so badly, she had to clench her teeth to keep them from chattering. "Do it," she told herself. "You came this far. Do it." Simone walked to the front door, her footsteps loud in the sudden quiet. The men glanced up as she passed, mild curiosity on their faces. She reached the door and turned the deadbolt, the metallic click echoing through the diner like a gunshot. Then she flipped the sign from open to closed. "Hey!" Viper called out, his mouth full of burger. "What the hell you doing?" Simone turned to face them, her back against the door. Slowly, deliberately, she pulled the .38 special from her apron pocket. The gun felt impossibly heavy in her hand, heavier than it had during all those nights she'd held it in her apartment, practicing her grip, finding her courage. 7 pairs of eyes locked onto the weapon. The diner went so silent she could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the back, the buzz of the neon sign outside. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered. Simone raised the gun with both hands, her arms extended, pointing it directly at the booth. Her hands were still shaking, but her voice, when it came, was steady. Rock steady. Qual de vocês é meu pai? The Portuguese slipped out before she could catch it. Her mother's language. The one she spoke when emotions ran too high for English. She swallowed. Tried again in English, her voice carrying across the diner like thunder. Which one of you is my father? The silence that followed Simone's question was absolute. Not the comfortable silence of a quiet night, but the suffocating kind that pressed against eardrums and made every breath sound like a hurricane. The 7 men in the booth sat frozen, their burgers forgotten, their coffee growing cold, their eyes fixed on the gun in Simone's trembling hands. Viper was the first to move. He started to slide out of the booth, his hand moving toward his belt. Don't. Simone's voice cracked like a whip. She adjusted her grip, both thumbs on the hammer. I will shoot you, I swear to God I will shoot you. Viper froze, his eyes narrowing. Lady, you've lost your damn mind. Maybe, Simone said, but I've got 6 bullets in this gun and there's 7 of you. Someone's gonna talk before I run out. Prophet shifted in his seat and for the first time he spoke. His voice was gravelly, worn smooth by decades of cigarettes and whiskey. Put the gun down, girl. Whatever you think is happening here, you don't get to tell me what to do, Simone interrupted, her voice rising. Not you. Not any of you. Not anymore. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows across the men's faces. Outside, the wind had picked up, sending tumbleweeds skittering across the parking lot. A coyote howled somewhere in the distance, its cry lonely and desperate. Diesel, the one with the kind eyes, raised his hands slowly, palms out. Ma'am, I don't know what this is about, but I think there's been some kind of mistake. We just stopped in for some food. We don't want any trouble. Trouble? Simone laughed, and it came out harsh and broken. You don't want trouble? That's rich. That's really rich. She took a step forward, the gun still trained on them. My mother died 3 months ago. Lorraine Watts. Does that name mean anything to any of you? She watched their faces carefully, looking for any flicker of recognition. Most looked genuinely confused. Cricket's leg was bouncing nervously under the table. Tiny had gone very still, his massive hands flat on the formica. Viper looked angry, his jaw clenched tight. But Prophet's expression had changed. Something flickered across his weathered face. Not quite recognition, not quite guilt, but something. Lorraine, Simone repeated, her voice softer now but no less intense. Lorraine Watts. Worked right here at this diner in 1959. 19 years old. Beautiful. Full of dreams. She paused, her throat tightening. And one of you sons of bitches, got her pregnant and disappeared. The words hung in the air like smoke. Simone could feel tears building behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not yet. Not until she had her answer. That's what this is about? Viper said, his voice dripping with disdain. Some old score from before I was even born? Lady, you're pointing a gun at the wrong people. Most of us weren't even writing back in 59. But some of you were, Simone shot back. She focused on Prophet, on the way his hands had gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. Some of you were here. I found pictures, letters. A newspaper clipping about a motorcycle club that used to run this route. The Iron Brotherhood. Same patch you're wearing now. Prophet's jaw tightened. A lot of men wore this patch over the years. But you were one of them, weren't you? Simone took another step closer. You're old enough. You would have been, 20-something back then? Young and wild and free, riding through small towns, breaking hearts wherever you went. You don't know what you're talking about, Prophet said, but his voice lacked conviction. Don't I? Simone reached into her other apron pocket with her left hand, keeping the gun steady in her right. She pulled out the photograph, the one of her mother and the faceless man, and tossed it onto the table. It skidded across the surface, stopping in front of Prophet. That's my mother. That's this diner. And that's someone who didn't want to be remembered. Prophet stared at the photograph for a long moment. His weathered hands reached out slowly, carefully, and picked it up. In the harsh fluorescent light, Simone could see his hands shaking. Prophet, Diesel said quietly. What's going on? The older man didn't answer. He just stared at the photograph, his dark eyes moving over every detail like he was seeing a ghost. And maybe he was. I remember this place, Prophet finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. Used to stop here all the time back in the day, before the interstate went in and killed all these old highway towns. He looked up at Simone, and she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. There was a girl who worked here, pretty thing. Always had a smile even when we were loud and drunk and stupid. Lorraine, Simone said. Prophet nodded slowly. Lorraine. Yeah, I remember her. The admission sent a jolt through Simone's entire body. The gun wavered in her hands. Was it you? Are you my father? No. The word came out flat, definitive. Prophet set the photograph down carefully. It wasn't me, but I knew who it was. The diner seemed to tilt on its axis. Simone's vision blurred at the edges. What? There were 8 of us back then, Prophet continued, his voice taking on a distant quality, like he was reading from a script written long ago. The original Iron Brotherhood. We were young and dumb and thought we owned the world. We'd ride from California to Texas and back again, stopping at places like this, raising hell, moving on. He paused, his eyes distant. Your mama, Lorraine. She caught Billy's eye. Billy, Simone repeated. The name felt foreign in her mouth. Billy Thornton, Prophet said. He was our leader back then. Charismatic son of a bitch. Could talk his way into or out of anything. He had this way about him, you know? Made you feel like you were the only person in the world when he looked at you. His expression darkened. But he was rotten underneath, mean drunk, meaner sober if I'm being honest. Viper leaned forward. Wait, Billy Thornton? The Billy Thornton? The one who… Yeah, Prophet cut him off sharply. That Billy. Simone's mind was racing, trying to process this new information. Where is he? This Billy. Where can I find him? The men exchanged glances. It was Cricket who spoke up, his voice high and nervous. Lady, Billy Thornton's been dead for 40 years. The words hit Simone like a physical blow. She stumbled back against the door, the gun dropping slightly. What? 1985, Prophet confirmed. Got into a fight outside a bar in Tucson. Other guy had a knife. Billy bled out in the parking lot before the ambulance arrived. He rubbed his face with both hands. We buried him in a cemetery outside Phoenix. Unmarked grave. Nobody claimed the body. Simone felt like the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. All these months of planning, of preparing, of building up her courage. And for what? To learn that the man she'd spent her entire life wondering about was already dust in an unmarked grave? No, she whispered. No, that can't be right. There has to be someone else. Someone who knows something. Someone who… There were 8 of us, Prophet interrupted gently. Original Iron Brotherhood. Billy's gone. So's Clutch. He died in a prison riot in '92. Demon wrapped his bike around a tree in '97. Steele had a heart attack in 2003. Ringo shot himself in 2008. Hammer got lung cancer last year. He met her eyes. That leaves me and one other. Who? Simone demanded. Who's the other one? Prophet hesitated, and in that hesitation Simone saw something shift in his expression. Fear? Regret? She couldn't tell. His name's Marcus Webb, Prophet finally said. But everyone called him Ghost. He left the club in 1960 right after… He stopped abruptly. Right after what? Simone pressed. Prophet's jaw worked like he was chewing on glass. Right after your mama told Billy she was pregnant. The revelation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Simone's hands tightened on the gun. Why would he leave because of that? Because Ghost and Billy had a falling out, Prophet said carefully. A bad one. Ended with Ghost beating Billy half to death in this very parking lot. We all thought Billy was going to die right there. Ghost took off that night, and we never saw him again. Why? Simone's voice was barely audible. Why did they fight? Prophet looked at her for a long moment, and Simone saw the answer in his eyes before he spoke it. Because Ghost was in love with your mama too, Prophet said quietly. And he didn't take kindly to the way Billy treated her after he found out she was carrying his child. The diner's walls seemed to close in. Simone's breath came in short, sharp gasps. Where is he? This Ghost? Where can I find him? I don't know, Prophet admitted. Last I heard, maybe 15 years ago, he was living somewhere in New Mexico. But that's old information. He could be anywhere. Could be dead for all I know. No. Simone shook her head violently. No, he's not dead. He can't be. Someone has to answer for what happened to my mother. Someone has to… What happened to your mother? Diesel asked softly. Simone's eyes burned. She raised me alone. Worked 2 jobs. 3 sometimes. Wore herself down to nothing trying to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. Never dated. Never remarried. Never even looked at another man. Her voice broke. She died at 64 years old working the night shift at this same goddamn diner. Too proud to ask for help. Too tired to keep going. And all because some piece of shit knocked her up and disappeared. The words echoed in the silence that followed. Simone could see her mother so clearly in her mind. The way she'd looked near the end, gray and worn and used up. The way she'd smiled, even when there was nothing to smile about. The way she'd told Simone, right before the end, "Don't waste your life looking for ghosts, baby. Some questions don't have good answers." But Simone had looked anyway, and now she had an answer, just not the one she'd wanted. Prophet cleared his throat. "Your mama, Lorraine, she was a good woman, better than any of us deserved. What Billy did to her, leaving her like that." He shook his head. "Some of us knew, some of us said something, but Billy didn't care. And back then, in that world, what the leader said was law. So you all just let it happen," Simone said bitterly. "We were cowards," Prophet admitted. "Every single one of us. Ghost was the only one with enough spine to stand up to Billy. And he paid for it by losing everything, his brothers, his club, his whole life." Simone lowered the gun slightly, her arms aching from holding it up so long. Her mind was spinning, trying to make sense of everything she'd learned. Billy Thornton was dead, had been dead for 40 years. But Ghost, Marcus Webb, might still be alive, might still have answers. "I need to find him," she said. "This ghost. I need to talk to him." "Why?" Viper asked, his voice sharp. "What's talking to some old man gonna solve? Your mama's gone, Billy's gone, what's done is done." "Because I need to know," Simone said fiercely. "I need to know what happened. All of it. Not just the parts you think I should know. I need to hear it from someone who was there, who gave a damn about her." Prophet nodded slowly. "I understand that, I do. But I'm telling you straight, I don't know where Ghost is. Haven't heard from him in years. Could take you months to track him down. Maybe longer. Then I'll take months," Simone said simply. The two locked eyes across the diner and something passed between them. An understanding, maybe. A recognition of shared pain, shared loss, shared guilt. "There might be one person who knows," Prophet said finally. "Old woman named Delilah Crow. She ran a boarding house in Santa Fe back in the 60s. Ghost stayed there for a while after he left the club. If anyone kept in touch with him, it would be her." He paused. "But I can't guarantee she's even still alive, or that she'll talk to you if she is." Simone nodded, committing the name to memory. Delilah Crow, Santa Fe. It wasn't much, but it was more than she'd had an hour ago. She became aware suddenly of how tired she was. The adrenaline that had been coursing through her veins was starting to fade, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion that made her want to collapse right there on the diner floor. But she couldn't. Not yet. "I want you all to leave," she said, her voice hoarse. "Take your food, take your bikes, and get out of my diner." "Your diner?" Viper raised an eyebrow. "My mother worked here for 45 years, Simone said. "She bled into this floor. So yeah, my diner." The men began sliding out of the booth, moving slowly, carefully, like they were afraid any sudden movement might make her pull the trigger. Prophet was the last to stand. He reached into his pocket and Simone tensed, raising the gun again. "Easy," Prophet said, pulling out his wallet. He placed a $100 bill on the table. "For the food, and for the trouble." "I don't want your money," Simone said. "Take it anyway," Prophet replied. He picked up the photograph of Lorraine and held it out to her. "And take this back. It's yours." Simone took the photograph with her free hand, her fingers brushing against his. Up close, she could see that Prophet's eyes weren't black at all. They were a very dark brown, so dark they absorbed light rather than reflected it, and in them she saw something that looked almost like sorrow. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry about what happened to your mama. She deserved better than what life gave her." Simone didn't trust herself to speak. She just nodded. The men filed out one by one, their boots loud on the linoleum. Viper was the last one through the door. He paused, looking back at Simone with an expression that might have been respect, or might have been pity. She couldn't tell. "You got guts, lady," he said. "I'll give you that." Then he was gone, and Simone was alone in the diner, with the smell of cold coffee and the echo of revelations. She waited until she heard the motorcycles start up, until the roar of their engines faded into the desert night, until she couldn't hear anything but the hum of the refrigerator and the pounding of her own heart. Only then did she lower the gun. Only then did she let herself sink to the floor, her back against the door, the photograph clutched in one hand and the .38 Special in the other. And only then did she let herself cry. 3 days after the confrontation at the Desert Rose Diner, Simone found herself driving east on Interstate 40 in a beat-up 2003 Honda Civic that had seen better decades. The car rattled every time she went over 60 miles per hour. The air conditioning worked only when it felt like it, and the radio was stuck on a country station that played the same 12 songs on repeat. But it was hers, paid off years ago, and it was taking her where she needed to go. Santa Fe was a 6-hour drive from the diner, assuming she didn't stop except for gas. She'd left at dawn, watching the sun rise over the desert in her rearview mirror, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded her of her mother's favorite scarf, the one she'd worn every Sunday to church even when it was threadbare and faded. Simone had called in sick to work. Well, not sick exactly. She'd told Marcus, the day manager who'd been trying to get her to go out with him for the past 5 years, that she had a family emergency, which wasn't entirely a lie. This was a family emergency, just one that had been brewing for 66 years. The highway stretched out before her like a gray ribbon, cutting through landscapes that shifted from Arizona's red rocks to New Mexico's high desert plains. She passed billboards advertising Indian casinos and truck stops, saw tumbleweeds caught in highway fences, watched vultures circling something dead in the distance. The scenery should have been beautiful, but Simone barely registered it. Her mind was elsewhere, replaying the events of that night over and over, like a film stuck on loop. "Which one of you is my father?" She'd practiced that line 100 times in her apartment, standing in front of the bathroom mirror with the gun in her hand, trying to make her voice sound strong and certain. But when the moment came, when she'd actually said the words, they'd come out raw and desperate. Not the voice of someone in control, but the voice of a woman who'd been carrying a question her entire life and couldn't bear the weight of it anymore. Billy Thornton. The name felt strange even now, days later. For 63 years, her father had been a blank space, a question mark, a shadow, and now he had a name. Billy Thornton, a man who'd been dead for 40 years, who died in a parking lot in Tucson with a knife in his gut, who'd probably never thought twice about the girl he'd left behind, or the baby growing in her belly. Simone's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The anger was still there, simmering just beneath her skin, but it had nowhere to go now. You couldn't yell at a ghost. You couldn't demand answers from a corpse in an unmarked grave. But Marcus Webb, ghost, he was still out there, maybe, and he'd been there. He'd known her mother. He'd cared enough to fight for her. That had to mean something. Around noon, Simone pulled off at a rest stop near Grants, New Mexico. The parking lot was mostly empty except for a semi-truck and a minivan with Kansas plates. She used the bathroom, a grim concrete affair that smelled like industrial cleaner and defeat, then bought a stale sandwich and a Coke from the vending machines. She sat at a picnic table in the shade, picking at the sandwich without really tasting it, watching the highway traffic blur past. A family emerged from the minivan. Mom, dad, 3 kids, all of them laughing about something as they headed toward the bathrooms. The youngest, a girl maybe 7 or 8, was skipping, her braids bouncing with each hop. Simone wondered what that felt like, to be part of a complete family, to have 2 parents and siblings and Sunday dinners where everyone was present. She'd never had that. It had always been just her and Lorraine against the world, and as much as her mother had loved her, and she had fiercely, protectively, there had always been a sadness in Lorraine's eyes, a shadow that never quite lifted. "Don't waste your life looking for ghosts, baby." Her mother's last words echoed in her mind, but Simone couldn't help it. She needed to know, needed to understand, not just for herself, but for Lorraine, for the young woman in the photograph who'd stood in front of the desert rose with hope in her eyes and her whole life ahead of her. The woman who'd been abandoned and left to raise a child alone in a world that had no mercy for single black mothers. Simone pulled out her phone and Googled Delilah Crow, Santa Fe, New Mexico. She'd done this search approximately 50 times since leaving the diner, as if repetition might magically produce different results. It never did. There was no Facebook profile, no LinkedIn, no Instagram. The only mention she'd found was in a 1987 article from the Santa Fe New Mexican about the closure of several downtown boarding houses due to new zoning regulations. The Crow House was mentioned in passing, a 3-story Victorian that had provided rooms to travelers and drifters since 1952. But that was 38 years ago. Delilah Crow would have to be in her 80s at least, maybe 90s. She might not even remember Ghost, might not remember anything at all. Simone finished her sandwich, tossed the wrapper in the trash, and got back on the road. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and without working AC, she drove with the windows down, hot wind whipping through the car and tangling her short gray hair. She'd stopped straightening it years ago, Let it go natural and curly, easier to manage during long shifts at the diner. The diner. She'd have to go back eventually. Bills didn't pay themselves. But the thought of walking back into that place, of putting on that stained apron and taking orders from truckers and tourists, of pretending that everything was normal, it made something twist painfully in her chest. Maybe she'd quit. Maybe she'd find something else, anything else. Or maybe she'd buy the damn place. The owner, old Pete Morrison, had been talking about retiring for years. How much could a rundown diner on a dying highway possibly cost? The thought made her laugh out loud, a sharp bark of sound that got lost in the wind rushing through the car. Her, Simone Watts, owner of the Desert Rose Diner, the same place where her mother had worked herself into an early grave, the same place where her father had sweet-talked her mother and then disappeared, the same place where, 3 nights ago, she'd pointed a gun at 7 strangers and demanded answers. Yeah, that made perfect sense. By 3 o'clock, she saw the sign. Santa Fe, 45 miles. Her heart rate picked up. She was close now, close to answers, or close to nothing, close to an old woman who might not exist or might not remember, or might not care. She took the exit into Santa Fe proper just after 4, and the landscape changed dramatically. Gone were the flat desert plains. Here the city climbed into the foothills of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, adobe buildings in shades of tan and coral spreading up the hillsides like a Pueblo painting. The architecture was distinctly southwestern. Flat roofs, rounded corners, wooden beams protruding from walls. Everything looked ancient and permanent, as if the buildings had grown from the earth itself rather than being built by human hands. Simone had never been to Santa Fe before. She'd lived her entire life in Arizona, rarely venturing beyond the highways that connected her apartment to the diner, to the grocery store, to the doctor's office. Her world had been small by design, or maybe by necessity. Travel cost money, and money had always been tight. She drove slowly through the downtown area, past art galleries with expensive sculptures in the windows, past tourists in white sneakers taking photos of historic churches, past restaurants with names in Spanish that she didn't understand. The city had a feel to it, cultured, artistic, wealthy in a quiet way that didn't advertise itself with billboards and neon. She pulled into a public parking lot and sat for a moment, trying to gather her courage. She had an address, or what she hoped was an address. She'd found it buried in the property records section of the county clerk's website, 417 Canyon Road. Delilah Crow, listed as the owner since 1976. The property records showed it was still in her name as of last year, which meant either she was alive or someone hadn't bothered to transfer the deed after she died. Only one way to find out. Canyon Road turned out to be a narrow street that climbed steeply up a hillside, lined with art galleries and upscale boutiques. Simone drove carefully, checking addresses, until she found 417. It sat slightly apart from the commercial buildings, set back behind a low adobe wall and an iron gate. The house itself was 3 stories, just as the article had mentioned, but it wasn't Victorian at all. That must have been a different boarding house. This was pure Santa Fe adobe, with rounded corners and a flat roof and vigas, wooden beams, jutting out at regular intervals. The property looked well maintained. The stucco was freshly painted, the courtyard garden full of native plants, sage and juniper and something with bright red flowers. A small sign near the gate read, "Private residence, no trespassing." Simone parked on the street and sat in the car, her hands gripping the steering wheel. This was it. This was the moment. She could get out of the car, walk up to that gate, ring the bell if there was one, and potentially get the answers she'd been seeking her entire life. Or she could start the car, drive back to Arizona, and pretend none of this had ever happened. "Don't waste your life looking for ghosts, baby." "I'm sorry, Mama," Simone whispered. "I have to know." She got out of the car before she could talk herself out of it. The afternoon sun was hot on her shoulders as she walked up to the gate. There was indeed a bell, an old-fashioned brass one with a pull chain. She pulled it and heard a distant chiming from inside the house. Nothing happened. She waited, counting to 60 in her head, then pulled the chain again. Still nothing. Disappointment crashed over her like a wave. Of course Delilah Crow wasn't home, or wasn't alive, or had moved years ago and the property records were just wrong. This whole trip had been a waste of time, a fool's errand, exactly what her mother had warned her against. Simone turned to go back to her car, tears burning her eyes. "Can I help you?" The voice came from behind her, making her jump. She spun around to find an elderly woman standing on the other side of the gate. She must have been in the garden and Simone hadn't seen her. She was small and bent with age, her white hair pulled back in a bun, her face a roadmap of wrinkles. But her eyes were sharp and clear, a bright hazel that missed nothing. Simone's voice came out as a croak. She cleared her throat and tried again. I'm looking for Delilah Crow. You found her, the old woman said, though I don't usually meet with tourists. The galleries are down the street if you're looking to buy art. I'm not a tourist, Simone said quickly. This is going to sound strange, but I'm looking for information about someone. A man named Marcus Webb. He went by the name Ghost. The change in Delilah's expression was instantaneous. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. Who are you? My name is Simone Watts. I think Marcus Webb knew my mother a long time ago, in 1959. Her name was Lorraine. Delilah stared at her for a long moment, her sharp eyes moving over Simone's face like she was reading a book. Then slowly she reached for the latch on the gate. You'd better come inside, she said. The courtyard was cool and shaded, with a small fountain in the center that burbled quietly. Delilah led Simone through the front door into a living room that was cluttered but clean, every surface covered with books and photographs and southwestern pottery. The walls were painted a warm terracotta, and afternoon light streamed through windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. Sit, Delilah commanded, gesturing to a leather couch that had seen better decades. She lowered herself into a rocking chair across from Simone, moving with the careful deliberation of someone whose bones ached. Now, start from the beginning. What do you want with Marcus? Simone took a deep breath and told her story. All of it. The diner, her mother, the photograph, the box she'd found, the confrontation with the Iron Brotherhood, Prophet's confession, Billy Thornton's name. Everything poured out of her in a rush, words tumbling over each other in her haste to get them all out before she lost her nerve. Delilah listened without interrupting, her weathered hands folded in her lap, her expression unreadable. When Simone finally finished, the old woman sat in silence for a long moment, rocking slowly back and forth. Billy Thornton, she finally said, and the name came out like a curse. That man was poison, pure poison. You knew him? Simone asked. I knew of him, Delilah corrected. Marcus told me stories. Nothing good. She stopped rocking and fixed Simone with those sharp hazel eyes. Your mother, Lorraine. Marcus talked about her. Quite a bit, actually, in the beginning. Simone's heart leaped. He did? What did he say? That she was the kindest person he'd ever met, that she had a smile that could light up a room, that she deserved better than what life had given her. Delilah paused. And that he'd failed her. Failed her how? By not being strong enough to take her away from Billy before it was too late. Delilah said softly. Marcus blamed himself for what happened, for your mother having to raise you alone. He felt like he should have done more, should have fought harder. But he did fight, Simone protested. Yeah, Prophet said he beat Billy half to death. And then he ran, Delilah said. That's what haunted him. Not that he'd fought Billy, but that he'd left afterward. Left your mother to deal with the consequences alone. Simone felt something crack open inside her chest. Where is he? Is he still alive? Delilah rocked slowly, considering. That depends on what you're planning to do if I tell you. I just want to talk to him, Simone said. I just want to understand what happened. I want to know about my mother, about who she was before everything. And if the answers hurt? Delilah asked. If the truth is worse than not knowing? Then at least I'll know, Simone said firmly. Delilah studied her for another long moment, then nodded slowly as if coming to a decision. Marcus is alive, as of 2 weeks ago anyway. He lives in Taos, about an hour north of here. Has a small place up in the hills, doesn't see many people anymore. Hope and fear warred in Simone's chest. Would he see me? I don't know, Delilah admitted. Marcus is. He's carried guilt for a long time. Seeing you might be too much for him. She stood slowly, moved to a desk in the corner, and pulled out a piece of paper and a pen. But I'll give you his address. What you do with it is up to you. Simone watched as Delilah wrote in careful, shaky handwriting. When she finished, she folded the paper and held it out. One more thing, Delilah said as Simone reached for it. Marcus is dying. The words hung in the air like a death knell. What? Cancer, Delilah said simply. Started in his lungs, spread everywhere. The doctors gave him 6 months, that was 4 months ago. Simone felt like the floor had disappeared beneath her. She'd come all this way, gotten this close, only to find out that time was running out. Again. Then I need to see him soon, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes? Delilah agreed. You do. The drive from Santa Fe to Taos should have been beautiful. State Road 68 wound through the Rio Grande Gorge, with the river cutting a silver ribbon through ancient volcanic rock, the Sangre de Cristo Mountains rising like jagged teeth against the evening sky. But Simone barely registered any of it. Her mind was occupied with a single thought, repeating like a mantra, "He's dying. He's dying. He's dying." She'd left Delilah's house with the address clutched in her hand and a warning ringing in her ears. Go easy on him. Whatever anger you're carrying, whatever questions you need answered, remember that Marcus has been carrying his own weight for 66 years. Some burdens break a person down to nothing. It was nearly 7 p.m. when Simone reached Taos, the sun beginning its descent behind the mountains, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. The town was smaller than Santa Fe, more rugged, with an edge that spoke of artists and wanderers and people who'd chosen to live at the end of the road. She drove through the plaza, past galleries and restaurants and tourists taking last-minute photographs, then headed north as Delilah's directions indicated. The pavement gave way to dirt after a few miles. Simone's Honda protested the transition, rattling over ruts and rocks, dust billowing up behind her like a brown cloud. The houses out here were sparse, single-story adobes set far apart, with scraggly juniper trees and patches of sage providing the only real vegetation. Mountains loomed to the east, their peaks still holding patches of snow despite it being late September. The address Delilah had given her, 478 Camino del Monte, corresponded to a small adobe structure at the end of a long driveway. The house was simple, almost austere, with a flat roof and small windows. A covered portal ran along the front, providing shade. An old pickup truck, its paint faded to a nondescript gray-brown, sat parked near the house. Smoke rose from a chimney, which seemed odd given the warmth of the evening, until Simone remembered that at this elevation, nights got cold fast. She parked behind the truck and sat for a moment, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. This was it. Behind that door was a man who'd known her mother, who'd loved her mother, according to Prophet, who'd fought for her and then disappeared, carrying guilt that had apparently eaten at him for 6 decades. A man who was dying. Simone forced herself out of the car. Her legs felt unsteady as she walked toward the front door, her footsteps crunching on gravel. She raised her hand to knock, then hesitated. What was she supposed to say? "Hi, I'm the daughter of the woman you loved 66 years ago. Remember her?" Before she could decide, the door opened. The man standing in the doorway was tall, or had been once. Now he stooped slightly, his shoulders curved forward in the way of people whose bodies had betrayed them. He was thin, alarmingly so, his clothes hanging loose on a frame that had clearly carried more weight in better times. His face was gaunt, cheekbones prominent, skin stretched tight over bone. His hair was white and wispy, combed back from a high forehead, but his eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray and clear and piercing. Those eyes moved over Simone's face, and she watched as recognition flickered across his features. Not recognition of her, but of something in her, something familiar. "Lorraine," he whispered, and the name came out like a prayer. "No," Simone said gently. "I'm her daughter, Simone." The man, Marcus, Ghost, her mother's defender, gripped the door frame, his knuckles going white. For a moment Simone thought he might collapse. Then he steadied himself, those storm cloud eyes filling with tears. "She had a daughter," he said, his voice rough and broken. "Of course she did. Of course." He studied her face like he was memorizing it. "You have her eyes." Exactly her eyes. Simone felt her own tears building. "Can I come in?" Marcus stepped back wordlessly, gesturing her inside. The interior of the house was as simple as the exterior. One main room serving as living space and kitchen, with doorways leading to what she assumed were a bedroom and bathroom. The furniture was minimal and old. The walls were bare except for a single photograph in a wooden frame hanging above the fireplace. Simone's breath caught in her throat. It was her mother, young, maybe 18 or 19, standing in front of the Desert Rose Diner in the same spot as the photograph Simone carried in her pocket. But this one was different. In this one, Lorraine's face was intact, unscratched, smiling at whoever held the camera. And her eyes, God, her eyes were full of life and hope and possibility. "I took that," Marcus said quietly, following her gaze. "Summer of 1959, right before everything went to hell." Simone couldn't look away from the photograph. Her mother had been so young, so beautiful, so full of dreams that would never come true. "Sit," Marcus said, gesturing to a worn couch. Please. I'd offer you something, but I don't keep much in the house anymore. Don't have much appetite these days. Simone sat, and Marcus lowered himself into a rocking chair across from her, moving with the careful deliberation of someone in constant pain. Up close, she could see the yellowing tinge to his skin, the dark circles under his eyes, the way his hands trembled slightly when he wasn't gripping something for support. Delilah told you, he said. It wasn't a question. About the cancer? Yes. Marcus nodded slowly. Figures. She's been after me to get my affairs in order, as she puts it. I keep telling her I don't have any affairs to order. Just this house and that truck and not much else. He paused. How is she? Delilah? Sharp as a tack, Simone said. She knew who I was the moment I mentioned your name. A ghost of a smile crossed Marcus's face. That sounds like her. Known her 45 years. She took me in when I had nowhere else to go back in 1960. Let me rent a room even though I couldn't always pay. Saved my life, probably. They sat in silence for a moment. The only sound the crackling of the fire and the ticking of a clock somewhere in the house. Simone didn't know where to begin. There was so much she wanted to ask. So many questions that had piled up over the years. But now that she was here, face to face with this dying man who'd loved her mother, the words stuck in her throat. You want to know about Billy? Marcus finally said. About what happened? Yes, Simone managed. Marcus rocked slowly, his eyes distant. I figured someone would come eventually. Thought it might be Lorraine herself back in the day. Used to imagine how that conversation would go. What I'd say. How I'd apologize. He looked at Simone. But she never came. And after a while I convinced myself that meant she'd moved on. Found happiness. Found someone better than any of us. She didn't, Simone said, her voice hard. She never dated. Never remarried. Worked herself to death at that same diner. Raising me alone. Marcus flinched like she'd struck him. I was afraid of that. Tell me what happened, Simone demanded. Tell me everything. Marcus took a shaky breath and began. The Iron Brotherhood rolled into that area in the spring of 1959. There were 8 of us. Billy, Prophet, Clutch, Demon, Steel, Ringo, Hammer, and me. We'd been riding together for about 5 years by then, raising hell from California to Texas and back. We weren't good men. I want you to understand that right up front. We drank too much, fought too much, treated people like they were disposable. We thought we were free living outside society's rules, but really we were just running from ourselves. He paused, his breathing labored. Simone could hear the rattle in his lungs. We stopped at the Desert Rose because it was the only place open late on that stretch of highway. Your mama was working the night shift. I remember walking in and seeing her behind the counter, this beautiful young woman with the kindest smile I'd ever seen. She treated us like we were human beings instead of the trash we were. Brought us coffee and food and didn't even blink when Billy made crude jokes or Clutch tried to grab her ass. Simone's hands clenched into fists. We kept coming back, Marcus continued. Every time we rode through, we'd stop at the Desert Rose. And every time, Billy paid more attention to your mama. He could be charming when he wanted to be. He'd tell her stories about the road, make her laugh, act like she was the most interesting person in the world. And she, his voice cracked, she fell for it. How could she not? She was 19 years old, working a dead-end job in a dying town. Billy represented freedom, adventure, everything she didn't have. But you fell for her too, Simone said. Marcus nodded. Yeah, I did. But I knew, we all knew, that Billy had claimed her. That's how it worked in the club. The leader got what he wanted, and the rest of us stepped aside. So I watched from a distance. Watched Billy sweet-talk her. Watched her fall in love with him. Watched the whole damn tragedy unfold like a train wreck I couldn't stop. By late summer, it was serious between them. Or at least Lorraine thought it was serious. Billy was still Billy. Sleeping with other women in other towns. Treating your mama like a convenience when it suited him. But she didn't know that. She thought they had a future together. Marcus's voice turned bitter. Then one night in September, she told him she was pregnant. The word hung in the air like a stone. Billy's reaction was immediate, Marcus said. He laughed. Actually laughed. Told her it wasn't his problem, that she should have been more careful, that he wasn't about to let some bastard child tie him down. The rest of us were there. We heard the whole thing. And we just stood there. We stood there and let him say those things to her. Tears were streaming down Marcus's face now, cutting tracks through the hollow valleys of his cheeks. Your mama didn't cry. That's what killed me. She just stood there behind that counter with her hand on her belly, and she nodded like she'd expected it all along. like she'd known from the beginning that this was how it would end. Then she went back to work, just turned around and started wiping down the counter like nothing had happened. "But you couldn't let it go," Simone said softly. "No," Marcus agreed. "I couldn't. I followed Billy outside and told him he was a piece of shit. Told him he needed to do right by her, by the baby. He told me to mind my own business. So I hit him." He looked down at his trembling hands. "I'd never hit another brother before. Never. It was the one unbreakable rule. But I hit him, and I kept hitting him, and I would have killed him if the others hadn't pulled me off. What happened then? Billy told me I was out. Done. If I ever showed my face around the Iron Brotherhood again, he'd kill me. The others, they all sided with him. Even Prophet, who I knew felt the same way I did about the whole situation. But loyalty to the club came first. Always." Marcus's voice was hollow. "So I left. Got on my bike and rode away. Left your mama to face everything alone." "Why didn't you go back?" Simone asked, her voice breaking. "Why didn't you at least check on her, make sure she was okay?" "Because I was a coward," Marcus said simply. "I told myself she was better off without me, that I'd just make things worse, that Billy might come after her if I stayed in contact. But the truth is, I was ashamed. Ashamed that I'd let it happen. Ashamed that I'd run away. Ashamed that I wasn't strong enough to give her what she needed." He looked at Simone with red-rimmed eyes. "I've thought about her every single day for 66 years. Wondered if she was okay. Wondered about the baby. About you. Wondered if I'd made the right choice or if I'd just taken the easy way out." "She struggled," Simone said, her voice hard. "She worked 2-3 jobs at a time. Dealt with racism and sexism and people calling her a whore for having a baby out of wedlock. She went without food so I could eat. Wore the same clothes for years because she couldn't afford new ones. And she did it all alone without any help from the man who got her pregnant or the man who claimed to care about her." Each word was a hammer blow, and Simone watched Marcus absorb them, watched his face crumple under the weight of his guilt. Good. Let him feel it. Let him carry the weight of what his cowardice had cost. But even as she thought it, even as the anger burned hot in her chest, another part of her, a smaller, quieter part, recognized the pain in his eyes, the genuine anguish. This man had been punishing himself for 6 decades. What more could she possibly add to that burden? "I'm sorry," Marcus whispered. "God, I'm so sorry for all of it. For not being stronger, for not going back, for letting her down when she needed someone most." He wiped his eyes with a trembling hand. Is Lorraine still alive?" "No," Simone said. "She died 3 months ago. Heart attack during her shift at the diner. She was 64 years old." Marcus made a sound like he'd been shot. His body folded in on itself, his head dropping to his chest. His shoulders shook with silent sobs that seemed to tear themselves out of his emaciated frame. Simone sat there watching him cry, feeling her own tears track down her face, and she realized something. Her mother hadn't just been abandoned by one man. She'd been abandoned by 2. Billy had walked away without a second thought. But Marcus had walked away because he cared too much and was too afraid to face what that caring demanded of him. She wasn't sure which was worse. After a long moment, Marcus looked up, his face wet and blotchy. Did she have a good life, despite everything? Simone wanted to lie, wanted to tell him that yes, Lorraine had been happy, had found love, had lived the life she deserved. But she couldn't. "She had me," Simone said, "and she loved me more than anything in the world. She made sure I went to school, had clothes, had food. She taught me to be strong, to not depend on anyone, to make my own way." She paused. But was she happy? No, I don't think she ever was. There was always something sad in her eyes, even when she was smiling, like she was carrying a grief she couldn't put down. Marcus nodded slowly, accepting this. She deserved better. Yes, Simone agreed. She did. They sat in silence as the fire crackled and the light outside faded to purple dusk. Simone felt exhausted, wrung out, like she'd run a marathon that had no finish line. She'd come here for answers and she'd gotten them, but the answers hadn't brought the closure she'd hoped for. If anything, they'd just opened up new wells of pain. "I have something for you," Marcus said suddenly. He pushed himself up from the rocking chair with obvious effort and disappeared into the bedroom. Simone heard him rummaging around, heard a drawer open and close. When he returned, he was carrying a small wooden box. He sat back down and opened it carefully. Inside were letters, dozens of them, yellowed with age, tied together with string. He pulled one out and held it up so Simone could see the envelope. It was addressed to Lorraine Watts, Desert Rose Diner, with a return address in Santa Fe. I wrote to her, Marcus said quietly, every month for 5 years after I left. Sent letters to the diner, figuring she'd still be working there. Asked how she was doing, how the baby was, if she needed anything. He looked at Simone. She never wrote back. After 5 years, I stopped trying. Figured she'd made it clear she wanted nothing to do with me. Simone stared at the letters, her mind reeling. She never mentioned any letters. Maybe she never got them, Marcus suggested. Maybe someone at the diner threw them away before she could see them. Or maybe she did get them and chose not to respond. Either way, I kept the copies. Kept them all these years like some kind of penance. He held the box out to Simone. Take them, read them. Maybe they'll help you understand that I did think about her, that I did care, even if I was too much of a coward to do anything about it. Simone took the box, feeling its weight in her hands. Inside were 60 letters, one for each month over 5 years. 60 attempts at connection, at redemption, at bridging a gap that had grown too wide to cross. There's something else, Marcus said. He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. My will, such as it is. The house, the truck, what little money I have in the bank, it's all going to you. Simone's head snapped up. What? No, I can't. You can and you will, Marcus said firmly. I don't have any other family. No kids of my own, no siblings, nothing. Delilah's already set. She doesn't need anything from me. But you're Lorraine's daughter. That makes you the closest thing to family I've got. His voice softened. Let me do this one thing right, please. Simone wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she didn't want his house or his money or anything else. But looking at his face, at the desperate hope in his eyes, the need to make some small amends before time ran out, she found she couldn't refuse him. Okay, she whispered. Marcus sagged with relief. Thank you. The sun had fully set now, the room lit only by the fire and a single lamp in the corner. Outside, coyotes were beginning their nightly chorus, their yips and howls echoing across the desert. Can I ask you something? Simone said. Anything. Did you love her? My mother? Marcus didn't hesitate. Yes, with everything I had. She was the best person I ever knew, and I let her slip away because I was too broken to hold on to something good. He met Simone's eyes. I know that doesn't change anything, doesn't erase the pain she went through or the struggles you faced. But yes, I loved her. I never stopped. Simone nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She stood, clutching the box of letters to her chest. I should go. It's getting late. There's a motel in town, Marcus said, rising with difficulty. The Kachina Lodge. It's clean, cheap. Tell them Marcus sent you. They know me. At the door, Simone paused and turned back. Marcus stood framed by the firelight, looking small and frail and impossibly old. Thank you, she said, for telling me the truth, for the letters, for, her voice broke, for caring about her, even if you couldn't show it the way she needed. I'm sorry I couldn't be the man she deserved, Marcus said softly, but I'm glad she had you. I'm glad something good came from all that pain. Simone walked to her car with tears streaming down her face, the box of letters pressed against her chest like a talisman. As she drove away, she looked in her rearview mirror and saw Marcus standing in the doorway, silhouetted by the warm light from inside, watching her go, just like he'd watched her mother disappear 66 years ago. The Kachina Lodge was exactly as Marcus had described. Clean, cheap, and mostly empty on a Tuesday night in late September. Simone checked into room 114, a ground floor unit that smelled faintly of pine cleaner and stale cigarette smoke that no amount of scrubbing could fully eliminate. The decor was aggressively southwestern, turquoise bedspreads, paintings of Cocopelli figures on the walls, a lamp made from a cactus skeleton. She barely noticed any of it. She set the wooden box on the small table by the window and stared at it like it might explode. Inside were 60 letters, 60 months of Marcus Webb trying to reach across the distance he'd created, trying to bridge a gap that maybe couldn't be bridged. 60 pieces of a story her mother had never told her. Had Lorraine received them? Had she read them and thrown them away? Or had someone at the diner intercepted them, decided that Lorraine was better off not knowing that the man who'd fought for her was still thinking about her? Simone's hands trembled as she opened the box. The letters were organized chronologically, each envelope marked with a date in Marcus's careful handwriting. The earliest was dated October 15, 1959, just weeks after he'd left. The latest was September 30th, 1964, exactly 5 years of correspondence sent into a void that never answered back. She pulled out the first letter, her heart hammering. The envelope was yellowed and brittle. The stamp, a 4-cent Liberty issue, a relic from another era. She slid the letter out carefully, unfolding paper that crackled with age. October 15th, 1959. Dear Lorraine, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't know if you'll throw it away the moment you see my name, and I couldn't blame you if you did. But I have to write. I have to try. I'm in Santa Fe now, staying at a boarding house run by a woman named Delilah. She's kind, doesn't ask too many questions. I got a job at a garage fixing motorcycles. It's honest work, which feels strange after so many years of living like we did. I think about you every day. Wonder how you're doing, if you're getting enough to eat, if the morning sickness is bad. I remember my sister being sick as a dog when she was pregnant with her first. She couldn't keep anything down for months. I know I don't have the right to ask, but are you okay? Do you need anything? I don't have much, but what I have is yours if you need it. I'm sorry, Lorraine. I'm sorry for Billy, for what he said to you, for what he did. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to make him do right by you. I'm sorry I left instead of staying to help you through this. If you never want to hear from me again, I understand. But please, if you need anything at all, write to me. The address is on the envelope. Marcus. Simone's vision blurred with tears. The letter was so earnest, so raw in its guilt and concern. This wasn't the writing of a man who'd forgotten about her mother. This was someone carrying a wound that wouldn't heal. She opened the second letter, dated November 12, 1959. Dear Lorraine, I haven't heard from you, but I'm writing anyway. Maybe these letters aren't reaching you. Maybe you're getting them and choosing not to respond. Either way, I'll keep trying. Winter's coming early here in the mountains. Already had our first snow last week. I bought a heavier coat from the thrift store downtown. Delilah says it's going to be a hard winter. She can feel it in her bones, she says. I wonder if you're warm enough. That diner always had terrible heating. I remember you'd wear 2 sweaters on cold nights and still be shivering by the end of your shift. The baby must be showing by now. 4 months along, if I'm counting right. I wonder if it's a boy or girl. I wonder if you've thought about names. I wonder if you're scared. I'm scared for you, Lorraine. Scared of you going through this alone. A woman shouldn't have to face something like this without support, without someone to hold her hand and tell her everything's going to be okay. I wish I was that someone. I wish I'd been brave enough to be that person when it mattered. Please write back, even if it's just to tell me you're all right. Marcus. Letter after letter, month after month, the pattern continued. Marcus writing, confessing his guilt, asking after her welfare, offering help that was never accepted because it was never acknowledged. Simone read them all, tears streaming down her face, her heart breaking for both of them. For her mother, struggling alone and apparently never knowing someone still cared, and for Marcus, sending message after message into a silence that must have felt like death. Some letters were longer than others. In December 1959, Marcus wrote about buying baby clothes at a church sale, just in case Lorraine needed them, and mailing them to the diner in a separate package. In February 1960, he wrote about how he'd stopped riding motorcycles, sold his bike, couldn't stomach the thought of being on the road anymore. In April 1960, he calculated that the baby must have been born by then, wondered if the delivery had gone well, hoped both mother and child were healthy. April 28, 1960. Dear Lorraine, if I'm counting right, you must have had the baby by now. I've been going crazy wondering if everything went okay, if you had any complications, if the baby is healthy. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but could you at least send a postcard? Just a few words to let me know you're both alive? I'll stop writing if you want me to, but I need to know you're okay. I've been having dreams about you. In them, you're holding a baby and smiling, really smiling, not the sad kind of smile you'd get sometimes when you thought no one was looking. In my dreams, everything worked out. You found someone good who takes care of you both. You're happy. I hope the dreams are true. I hope you're happy, Lorraine. You deserve to be happy. Please write back. Marcus. But Lorraine never did. At least there was no evidence that she had. The letters continued, growing slightly less frequent as the months turned into years. Marcus wrote about his life in Santa Fe, the garage where he worked, the friends he'd made, the quiet, ordinary existence he'd built. But underneath every mundane detail was the constant thread of worry, of guilt, of love that had nowhere to go. By 1962, the tone had shifted slightly. Marcus had begun to accept that Lorraine might never respond, but he wrote anyway, as if the act of writing was its own form of penance. January 3, 1962. Dear Lorraine, it's been 2 years since I started writing these letters. 2 years of silence from your end. I've accepted that you don't want to hear from me, and I respect that, but I can't seem to stop writing. Maybe these letters are more for me than for you. Maybe this is how I process what happened, how I live with the guilt of walking away when you needed someone to stay. The baby, your child, must be almost 2 years old now, walking, talking, getting into everything the way toddlers do. I wonder what they look like, if they have your eyes, your smile. I wonder if they're healthy and happy and loved. I hope they know how lucky they are to have you as a mother. I hope they grow up understanding what an incredible woman you are. I'm not going to ask you to write back anymore. I know you won't, but I'll keep writing, at least for a while longer, because it's the only connection I have left to you. Take care of yourself, Lorraine. Take care of that baby. Marcus Simone had to stop reading. She set the letters aside and went into the bathroom, splashing cold water on her face, trying to compose herself. Her reflection in the mirror looked exhausted, eyes red and swollen, face drawn. She looked like her mother had looked near the end, worn down by decades of carrying weight that was never meant to be carried alone. Had Lorraine gotten these letters? Had she read them in secret, hidden them away, kept the knowledge of Marcus's continuing care locked up inside where even her daughter couldn't find it? Or had they truly never reached her, intercepted by someone who thought they were protecting her from reopening old wounds? Simone would never know. That knowledge had died with Lorraine 3 months ago. She returned to the table and continued reading. The later letters grew shorter, more resigned, or Marcus had clearly given up hope of ever hearing back, but he continued writing out of habit or duty, or some combination of both. The final letter was dated September 30th, 1964. Dear Lorraine, this is my last letter. 5 years is long enough to send messages into the void. It's time to accept that whatever connection we might have had is gone, buried under the weight of my failure and your justified silence. I hope you've found happiness. I hope the child is thriving. I hope you've met someone who can give you what you deserve. Stability, respect, love that doesn't run away when things get hard. I'm going to keep living here in Santa Fe. I'll be at the same address if you ever need anything. But I won't write anymore. It's not fair to you, and it's not healthy for me. I loved you, Lorraine. I want you to know that. I loved you in a way I've never loved anyone before or since. But love wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. And I've had to learn to live with that. Be happy. Please be happy. Goodbye. Marcus Simone sat back in the chair, the letter trembling in her hands. This was it. The end of Marcus's attempt to reach across the distance. After this, he'd kept the letters but stopped writing them, stopped hoping for a response that would never come. And her mother? Had she known? Had she cared? Simone pulled out her phone and looked at the time. 11:47 p.m. Too late to call anyone, too late to do anything productive, but sleep felt impossible. Her mind was racing, questions piling up faster than she could process them. She opened her photo gallery and found the picture she'd taken of her mother's photograph, the one with the man's face scratched out. She'd assumed it was Billy, the man who'd gotten Lorraine pregnant and abandoned her. But now she wondered, had it been Marcus? Had Lorraine scratched out his face in anger and hurt because he'd left too? Or had she kept Marcus's face intact in the photograph that hung in his house and only destroyed Billy's? There was no way to know. Some questions had died with her mother. Simone set her phone down and reached for the wooden box again. Underneath the letters was something else, a small black and white photograph different from the others. She pulled it out carefully. It showed 3 people standing in front of the Desert Rose Diner. On the left was Lorraine, young and radiant, her hand resting on her still flat belly. On the right was a man, Billy presumably, tall and handsome in a dangerous sort of way, his arm slung possessively around Lorraine's shoulders. And in the middle, slightly apart from the other 2, was Marcus, younger, healthier, with dark hair and a lean build, but those same storm cloud eyes she'd seen tonight. He was looking at Lorraine, not at the camera, and the expression on his face was one of such naked longing that it made Simone's chest ache. She flipped the photo over. On the back, in handwriting she didn't recognize, Summer 59, before everything changed. The same words as on the photo her mother had kept. But this was the complete picture, the before, with all 3 of them together, before Billy's cruelty and Marcus's cowardice had torn everything apart. Simone stared at the photograph until her vision blurred. This was her origin story. These 3 people, One dead for 40 years, one dead for 3 months, one dying in a small adobe house an hour north of here, had created the circumstances that led to her existence. Their choices, their failures, their pain, had cascaded forward through time and shaped every aspect of her life. She thought about her mother, working 3 jobs, wearing the same clothes for years, going without so Simone could have. She thought about Marcus, writing letter after letter into silence, carrying guilt like a stone around his neck for 6 decades. She thought about Billy, dying in a Tucson parking lot with a knife in his gut, probably never thinking twice about the woman he'd abandoned, or the child he'd never know. What did it all mean? What was she supposed to do with this knowledge? A soft knock on the door made her jump. Simone glanced at the clock. 12:15 a.m. Who the hell would be knocking at this hour? She moved to the door cautiously and peered through the peephole. A woman stood outside, elderly, wrapped in a thick shawl despite the mild temperature. Even through the distorted view of the peephole, Simone recognized her. Delilah. Simone opened the door. How did you? Small town, Delilah said simply. Word travels fast when an out-of-towner checks in and mentions Marcus's name. She held up a thermos. I brought tea. Thought you might need it. Simone stepped aside, letting the old woman enter. Delilah moved to the table, saw the scattered letters, and nodded knowingly. He gave them to you. You knew about them? Of course I knew. I'm the one who mailed them for him every month. Watched him write them with this desperate hope in his eyes that maybe this time she'd write back. Delilah poured tea into the thermos cap and handed it to Simone. She never did. Did they reach her? Simone asked. The letters. Did my mother get them? Delilah sat heavily in the chair Simone had vacated. I don't know. Marcus always wondered the same thing. Maybe someone at the diner threw them away. Maybe she got them and couldn't bear to read them. Maybe she read every single one and chose not to respond. She shrugged. Some questions don't have answers. Simone sipped the tea. It was herbal, slightly sweet with a hint of something she couldn't identify. It warmed her from the inside out. He's dying, Simone said. Yes, Delilah confirmed. Probably has a month left. Maybe less. The cancer's spread everywhere. He's on hospice now, just managing pain, waiting for the end. He's leaving me everything. His house, his money, all of it. I know. He told me. Delilah met Simone's eyes. Are you going to accept it? I don't know, Simone admitted. It feels wrong, like I'm profiting from his guilt. Or, Delilah suggested gently, you're accepting what he needs to give. Sometimes the greatest gift we can offer someone is letting them make amends, even if it comes too late. They sat in silence for a moment, drinking tea, the scattered letters bearing witness to their conversation. Did he ever stop loving her? Simone asked. My mother? Delilah shook her head. No, never. I once asked him why he didn't try to move on, find someone else. He said there wasn't any point. He'd already met the best person he'd ever know, and he'd let her go. Nothing else would ever compare. Simone felt tears building again. That's heartbreaking. Yes, Delilah agreed. It is, but it's also beautiful in its own tragic way. Your mother inspired that kind of love in someone. Even if she never knew it, even if it came from a man too broken to act on it, that love existed. It was real. I don't know what to do with all this, Simone whispered. All this information, all this pain. It doesn't change anything. My mother's still dead. Marcus is dying. Billy's been dead for 40 years. What's the point? The point, Delilah said firmly, is that you know the truth now. You understand where you came from, what forces shaped your existence. That's not nothing, Simone. That's everything. She stood, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Get some sleep. In the morning, things won't feel quite so overwhelming. She paused at the door. And go see Marcus again before you leave. He doesn't have much time left. Whatever you need to say to him, whatever questions you still have, don't wait. Waiting is how we end up with 60 unanswered letters. After Delilah left, Simone gathered all the letters and carefully placed them back in the wooden box. She set the photograph of the 3 of them on top, looking one more time at Marcus's face, at the longing written so clearly there. Then she lay down on the bed, still fully clothed, and closed her eyes. But sleep wouldn't come. Her mind kept replaying everything. The confrontation at the diner, the drive to Santa Fe, Marcus's gaunt face, the letters, all of it swirling together into a narrative that felt both tragic and somehow necessary. She thought about forgiveness, about whether she could forgive Marcus for leaving her mother, about whether her mother had forgiven him, or even known there was anything to forgive, about whether forgiveness even mattered at this point. with everyone either dead or dying, and she thought about her own life. 63 years of existing without knowing her full story, without understanding the complex web of love and guilt and failure that had brought her into being. She'd always blamed Billy, the nameless, faceless man who'd gotten her mother pregnant and disappeared. But now she knew there had been someone else. Someone who'd cared, who'd tried, who'd failed in a different but equally devastating way. Simone amaneció sin haber dormido, con las revelaciones de la noche anterior girando en su mente. Al salir el sol, decidió volver a la casa de Marcus. Necesitaba respuestas y entender cómo 3 vidas rotas habían terminado formando la suya. Al llegar, encontró el lugar silencioso y polvoriento. Marcus abrió la puerta con dificultad. Su aspecto era peor que el día anterior. El olor medicinal del ambiente le recordó a Simón los últimos días de su madre. Él se dejó caer en el sillón y admitió que el dolor ya casi no lo dejaba dormir. Simón sacó la caja con las cartas. «Las leí todas», dijo. Creía que su madre nunca las había recibido. Lorraine guardaba todo y si esas cartas hubieran llegado, las habría encontrado. Marcus cerró los ojos, comprendiendo. Esperaba que no las hubiera visto. Así al menos no me había rechazado, murmuró. Simón sospechaba que el dueño del restaurante, Pete Morrison, las había interceptado creyendo que la protegía. Marcus se lamentó. Debía haber ido yo mismo, pero tenía miedo de verla odiarme. Confesó que su cobardía fue esconderse tras las cartas, fingiendo acción cuando solo huía. Explicó que se convenció de que Lorraine estaría mejor sin él. No tenía educación, ni dinero, ni futuro. Simón lo enfrentó. Al menos habrías estado presente, que es más de lo que Billy fue. Marcus aceptó, avergonzado. A los 24 años, dijo, estaba roto, criado bajo reglas donde la debilidad era pecado, y la lealtad al club lo había dejado sin rumbo. Cuando Simón le pidió que hablara de su madre, su rostro se iluminó. Era luz pura, dijo. Soñaba con ser maestra, pero gastó todo en el tratamiento de su madre enferma. Amaba los libros, las historias de otros mundos, lugares donde podía empezar de nuevo. Simón lloró. Su madre nunca le habló de sueños, solo de sobrevivir. Marcus asintió. La vida la aplastó. Soñaba con darte algo mejor. Simón respondió que a pesar de todo su madre lo logró. Le dio seguridad, comida, educación. Eso era Lorraine, dijo él. Fuerte, generosa, imposible de quebrar. Y tú tienes esa fuerza. Simón rompió en llanto. Estoy furiosa con todos. Con Billy, contigo, con ella. Por tanto silencio, por tanta injusticia. No sé qué hacer con tanta rabia. Marcus la miró con ternura. La ira puede quemarte o encenderte. Tú decides. Marcus le confesó a Simón que había pasado toda su vida arrepintiéndose de no haber cambiado a tiempo. Le advirtió que no permitiera que el rencor la convirtiera en un fantasma de sí misma. Le recordó los sacrificios de su madre, quien soñó con algo mejor para ella. Aunque Simón creía estar demasiado vieja para soñar, Marcus la retó. Todavía tenía años para construir algo nuevo. Entre lágrimas, Simón admitió que deseaba perdonarlo, no por él, sino por liberarse del peso que la consumía. Marcus le respondió que no necesitaba hacerlo, pero ella insistió. Quería dejar de vivir con el odio que había heredado. Tomados de la mano, compartieron un silencio lleno de comprensión. Marcus le dijo que su madre fue la mejor persona que conoció, y que Simón era su verdadero legado. Simón, conmovida, le ofreció ser enterrado junto a su madre en Flagstaff. Marcus se quebró, creyendo no merecerlo, pero ella le explicó que el perdón era el último acto de amor que su madre habría querido. Entre sollozos, Marcus la abrazó. Luego, le entregó una pequeña caja con un anillo, el que había comprado en 1959 para pedirle matrimonio a Lorraine, pero nunca tuvo el valor de hacerlo. Se lo dio a Simón como símbolo de lo que se pierde cuando uno no actúa a tiempo. Pasaron el resto del día recordando a Lorraine, sus risas, su fuerza, su generosidad. Cuando llegó Delilah, habló del estado terminal de Marcus. Le quedaban pocos días. Simón prometió acompañarlo hasta el final. Antes de morir, Marcus dispuso que toda su herencia pasara a Simón y pidió ser enterrado junto a Lorraine. Días después, Simón lo perdonó sinceramente. De regreso al motel, con las cartas y el anillo en el bolsillo, sintió por primera vez en años una paz nueva. Decidió honrar a su madre comprando el Desert Rose Diner, el lugar donde había trabajado por décadas, para transformarlo en un espacio digno. Marcus murió 6 días más tarde, con Simone a su lado. Fue enterrado junto a Lorraine bajo la inscripción: Marcus Ghost Webb. Amó toda su vida. 9 meses después, el renovado Desert Rose reabrió con una pared dedicada a Lorraine Watts, cuya foto decía: ella hizo que todos se sintieran vistos. Y en una pequeña casa sobre las colinas de Taos, Simone guardó las 60 cartas, testimonio de un amor que llegó tarde pero nunca dejó de arder.